In this lecture, we're going to talk about a bunch of more stuff that you should know about working with NPM packages, such as versioning, updating, or deleting packages, and also some other stuff. So let's get started. And the first thing that I want to talk about in this video is these version numbers of our packages. So most of the packages on NPM follow the so-called semantic version notation, which means that their version numbers is always expressed with these three numbers. So the first one here is called the major version, then the second one is called the minor version, and the third one is called the patch version. And there's actually a meaning in these three numbers. So the patch version, which is just this last one here, is only intended to fix bugs. So let's say that in version 1.18, the developers found a bug, and so they fixed that bug and then released 1.18.1. Okay, then they found another bug, and then they released 1.18.2, and so on and so forth, until they reached 1.18.11, which is the current version number. So again, this last one here is just for bug fixes. Then after that, we have the minor version. And the minor version introduces some new features into the package, but it does not include breaking changes. So all the changes that are done in a new version number will always be backward compatible. Okay? So if one day the NodeMon team, for example, decides to release version 1.19, well, that will then include some new features, but it will not break our code. And the same, of course, happens with this one here. So if someday there is Slugify 1.4, well, then our code is still going to work the same. There will not be any breaking changes. Simply there will be something new, so some new features, which are not just bug fixes. Right? So bug fixes again are for the third, so for the patch version, and then minor new features are for the minor version. Then of course we have the major version, which is only bumped up whenever it is a huge new release which can have breaking changes. So for example, if Slugify 2 comes along, well, our code might no longer work because the Slugify function that we have here, for example, might have changed its name, or maybe the parameter that it expects here are different, or the options might have changed, or something might have changed that will break previous versions. Okay? And so be aware that when there is a new version, it might usually affect the code that you already have. All right? And so because of that, it is also important to talk about updating packages. So in our package.json file, this small symbol here that comes in front of the version number is what specifies which updates we accept for each of the packages. So this symbol here, which NPM specifies here by default, means that we accept patch and minor releases. Now, how do we actually update packages? Well, let's actually quit this process here. And the first thing that we can do is to check if there are any outdated packages. So we write npm outdated, and that should then give us actually a table with all the packages that are outdated. Well, right now they're all up to date, and so that didn't really happen. So what I want to show you now is that we can actually install a certain package with a certain version number. So let's do that with the Slugify and install it at version 1.0.0. So npm install Slugify and then add 1.0.0. So let's try that out. And so now indeed we have 1.0.0. Okay, when we hover it, it actually says latest version 1.3.4, which is what we had before, right? But if we now run npm outdated, it should then give us that. So we see that current is 1.0.0, wanted is 1.3.4, because that is the one that we accept. Because remember that with this here, we accept all the patch and all the minor releases. But of course, we can also change that. So for example, we can set it to this symbol here. And this will then only accept patch releases. So this one is a bit safer. So if we run npm outdated now again, let's see what we get. And so now the wanted is only 1.0.2. Because again, we only accept minor versions. And so 1.3.4 is not accepted by us because, well, we do not accept any of the minor releases. So again, just patch releases. So if we were to do npm update Slugify now, let's see what we got then. And so now we're at 1.0.2, and you see that it changed back, or like updating configuration here to accept minor and patch releases, not just the patch releases like we had before. So if we're going to run this now again, it should actually bump us up all the way to 1.3.4 like we had before, right? And indeed, here we go. All right, so that is how we update packages. And there are other configurations that we can choose here. So we can say, for example, that we want all of the versions. So if at some point there is a version 2, and if we then update our packages, it will then automatically bump our version up to version 2. So this one includes all the versions, right? Even the ones with breaking changes. But that's not a good idea usually. And so I usually just go with this one that is default, or sometimes even this one here. Because at some points, even if a minor release should simply introduce new features, but no breaking changes, we know that sometimes there can be bugs that developers do not found, and then these bugs, they find their way into our code and might break our code. And we do not want that, of course. And so the safest version is to just use this one for bug fixes. And so let's actually just keep it like this here, just for demonstration purposes, all right? And so this is what you need to know about version numbers and updating. But we can of course also delete packages. So let's now go ahead and install Express. All right, so just so that we can then go ahead and delete it after that. And I'm sure that you can guess how we can do that. And so that is very easy. npm uninstall, so it's actually not called delete, it's really uninstalling. So we install and we uninstall Express. Okay, and so that will then delete it from our node modules folder and also from our dependencies in the package.json file. Okay, so each time we decide not to use a module anymore, well, we should always go ahead and remove it, or actually uninstall it. And now as a final thing, I want to talk a little bit about the node modules folder. So this folder, which contains all the dependencies of our project. So let's say that you want to share your code with someone, or that you, for example, want to start working on one computer and then move to the next one. You will never share this node modules folder, because this code, you can easily get it from npm. There's no need to go ahead and copy all of this code here, for example, to a GitHub repository or to a Dropbox folder, or really somewhere that you want to share your code. Because this folder here, as you see, has tons of folders, and each of them might have tons of files, and all of a sudden you might end up with tens or hundreds of thousands of files. And so you should never share this folder and never check it out into your GitHub repository. So let's say that you uploaded this code to your GitHub account without this node modules. Or you put it into your Dropbox at one computer and downloaded it at the other one. So let's say we now downloaded this code here, so without node modules. So we delete that one now and end up with just our regular project folder. So how do we now get back our dependencies, so our node modules folder? Well, it's very easy. All we have to do is npm install. So what it did is to read our package.json file, read our dependencies, and then download everything back into this folder. All right. Now, one important piece of this puzzle is the package.log.json file. So if we open that up, we get a list of all the versions of all the packages that we're actually using. And that includes the dependencies of our dependencies. So let's go to Slugify, for example. Slugify. And so here we see that we're using version 1.3.4. And so that is very, very important, because if you share your code, you want the other developer or even yourself to be using the exact same package versions so that your code works the exact same way for you and for the other developer. And so for that, the exact version numbers are basically set in stone in this package.log.json file. Okay? So if you share your code, no matter if you're using GitHub or Dropbox or something like that, always share your package.json file and the package.log.json file, because these two files are necessary for the other developer to then reconstruct basically the Node modules folder. All right. And yeah, I think that's all you need to know about package versions, updating, uninstalling, and also sharing code with npm, package.json, and package.log.json. If there's anything more that you want to know, you can again always ask in the course Q&A, and then you will get help there.